And welcome back, footy fans. It's your host, Coach Donnie, has back with another episode of Donnie's Disposals. And here it is, ladies and gentlemen. I know I've done through my off-season supporter series, but I caught an opportunity I just could not turn down. One tweet sometimes can find really cool things to happen. This gentleman here who is joining me today saw my tweet about a game I was watching on the SANFL Now app between Norwood and I think it was Central Districts. And he put it out there. So I have to appreciate this that he loved a tweet from a little old American watching some SANFL. I bring in Mr. Phil Aspinall. Phil, thank you for joining me today.
Hey, Donnie, it's great to be here with you, mate. And yeah, it is amazing. One tweet brought us together. Pretty cool.
It is absolutely fantastic. So before we go into the footy talk, and I can't wait to find out some information about how a guy in SA got into commentary and does SANFL, but we'll get to that in just a little bit. Just a little bit about who you are personally outside of and behind the mic when it comes to footy.
Yeah, so I'm Phil Aspinall. I'm 41 years old, born and bred in South Australia. I'm one of five boys. So footy's always been in our upbringing. We played it from a little kid in the backyard at home. Always had half a team to compete against with the five brothers. I'm happily married, beautiful wife, Magdalena. It's her birthday tomorrow, so a shout out. Happy birthday, Magdalena. And a beautiful miracle boy, a 4-year-old son named Ruben. He's just the light of our lives and working in aluminium sales, work for an aluminium company called Capril, and I've been doing that for about 15 years and love it.
Fantastic, fantastic. Well, definitely when you get a chance, please wish your lovely wife a happy birthday from Des Moines, Iowa from me. We'll get it on the podcast there. So we'll have it
Absolutely.
forever. So we'll jump into it. As you said, born and raised in Footy Mad SA. I gotta ask this favorite part about the sport of footy.
I just love the competition. I love the camaraderie that you get. I love how teams come together, and it's just been in my upbringing since I was a little fella. So it's all I've ever known. Born and raised in the heart of Central Districts in Elizabeth, and yeah, been coming to Central's games since I was probably 7 or 8 years old.
Awesome, awesome. And as you said, one of five boys. So I know this is probably going to be a fun one. What is your earliest footy memory that you can recall?
Probably the competitiveness. I'm in the mid range. I've got two older brothers and one younger brother, two younger brothers rather. So probably just that competitive nature and a game that a classic Aussie rules game marks up, where you get a group of guys to stay at one end, you kick the ball up, and you take marks over the top of the pack. And being a bigger guy, being the bigger of all of us, I ended up always having to be the one that everyone climbed over. I never got the
Mm-hmm.
chance to jump over the others. So probably that's one of my earliest memories as a kid growing up.
You hate saying it, but you were the step ladder for everybody's
Yes,
specky.
yes,
Nobody remembers who Madra jumps on. They just remember that Madra jumped on
that's
somebody,
it. Exactly.
unfortunately. So you said you grew up with it. You played it with your brothers there. So I know you played. So when you did play, did you play any organized footy? And if so, what position were you?
Yeah, look, for most of my junior footy, I played in the ruck, being one of the tallest kids. So definitely spent a lot of time playing in the ruck, and then managed to find myself playing positional, spots, centre half forward, full forward, and then in the latter parts of my amateur career, before I had a bad injury that got me into commentary to find something else, I ended up playing full back. So I played a year with a team here in Adelaide called the Golden Grove Kookaburras, and spent a year playing at full back, which was different, was interesting. I think playing a defensive position in the back part of my career was assisted by being a forward for predominantly all of my career. So it made me think about how a forward would play, and I was able to use that to my advantage as a defender.
Yeah, I've noticed it seems like several times that a renaissance of a forward can be going back. I mean, Paddy
Yeah,
McCartan. I mean, I'm a huge Sydney Swan supporter. I'm unabashed when it comes to it. So seeing Paddy McCartan go from that always known as a forward, and then this last year goes into an intercepted
I'm one
defender
of the
was
best in the
absolutely
game.
fantastic. So we jump to it as I see that Sandful gear on that you're wearing. So I asked this: do you support a Sandful club? And if not, have you ever come close to?
Absolutely, Donnie. Being born and bred in Elizabeth, there is only one team, and that's the Central Districts Bulldogs. I'm actually lucky enough. I've been coming here for what 40 odd years now, 30 odd years. The club was kind enough to let me use their boardroom at the moment, so we're doing this podcast live from the Central Districts boardroom, where over the many decades of the club's history, some amazing administrators and decisions would have been made from this very boardroom. So yeah, doggies fan through and through. Used to hang around with the cheer squad, follow the team end to end, and cheer on all the boys. And yeah, it's a passion of mine. I bleed red, white, and blue.
That is fantastic. And I think it's kind of funny that it's a great transition because I remember Luke Darcy in the year 2016 when he was calling the GWS game, and you could tell that his doggies part came out when he was able to say that they made it to the grand final. So I ask this sometimes as a caller, is it difficult to maintain the fandom if you're calling a Centrals game, having to be neutral? And if not, do you believe it's easier not supporting a side?
The only easier thing I find, Donnie, is the player identification. I quite find I see a lot more Centrals games than I will from others. So
Hmm.
one of the things I pride myself on with commentary is making sure I get the player right, making sure I know
Hmm.
who it is. So if I'm doing a Centrals game, it's second nature. I don't need to worry about doing too much research. Of course, there's always new players, but back to your initial question, it was extremely difficult early days to not take my Centrals hat off when commentating, and a little bit of familiarity to the point where I'd almost be calling Central's players by both their Christian name and their surname, and other opposition players just say, Smith's got the ball type thing. So
Hmm.
that took a little while to get some mentoring and get that out of my commentary style. No doubt, there's no denying that if I'm not the play-by-play caller at the time and the doggies kick a goal, there's a little bit of a fist pump under the commentary bench. But I certainly try and keep that bias level-headed when I'm calling.
It's never easy to do it, and you respect that you're honest about it. So I absolutely love that. So we'll stay with Centrals, and again, I can see that absolutely awesome photo just over your left side shoulder with the awesome trophy there, and some of the photos there. So it was a perfect transition. You remember the first Centrals item you were ever given or bought?
Yeah, it was a scarf, a Central District scarf. I reckon it was a hand-me-down. My parents are Central supporters when they first came over from England, the old 10-pound Poms, and it was a Central's scarf, rather, a red, white, and blue knitted scarf that I was given. And I reckon I've still got it home that I've handed down to my son.
Fantastic. I love hearing those little knickknacks that people get have. And I've known one person that I interviewed was Melbourne Demons that she got it when she was a little girl and she still has it. And she plans on giving it to her child when she does have it. So I love those stories. And then I asked this just because, again, since you're such a huge doggy supporter, what's the first Centrals game that you attended live?
I remember coming here to Elizabeth Oval, or now known as Ex Convenience Oval, get the sponsors plug in.
Hmm.
It was about 1986, so I would have only been about 4 or 5 years old, and it was Centrals and Glenelg, the Tigers. Ironically, they're playing the Tigers this morning in a trial game that I've come out to have a look at. So 1986, I remember my dad walking me down the famous concrete terraces, the steps here at Elizabeth, and I just remember thinking, wow, those men out on the oval, they're a lot bigger than in real life than what they look like on TV.
Yeah, it's insane to think about that it's you see him on the TV screen, you're like, hey, he doesn't look that big, and then you get to the field and you're like, whoa, okay, that was definitely bigger than I thought. So you might have kind of already answered this next question because again, everybody gets into commentary or coaching or so many different things outside of being a footy player a little bit differently. So can you remember I think you kind of said you got into an injury which kind of helped you get into it. Is that the main reason that you decided to go into commentary, or you just wanted to stay involved with the footy, unfortunately, when your career was over?
Yeah, when footy had to come to a playing halt for me due to a bad knee injury, and it was almost a decision that I just didn't want to risk getting injured again. I was a
Hmm.
sales rep on the road with a company car at the time, and it impacted my ability to do my job. So I was concerned that that would have an impact there. So I started off by heading along to Central's games, and just as a fan, there was an online forum, and I would just blog about the game. I would write some notes down during the game. I would blog about it, and then a colleague of mine, who's a wonderful friend now as well, a gentleman by the name of Phil Hurd, happened just to notice my details within the blogging and touched out through social media and asked me, do I want to have an opportunity to help out with the broadcast? And there was a local community radio station broadcasting some games, and it all started there. Life FM were the name of the radio station, and Phil Hurd and the Life FM crew gave me that opportunity, and that was 16 years ago, Donnie. I'm in my 16th season of broadcasting SANFL.
No, that's absolutely fantastic. Congratulations on that. And you absolutely I listened to that Norwood Central's game and it was fantastically called by both of you guys. So keep up the great work. You're still going fine. So I asked this. I've done a little bit of commentary as we kind of set off, Mike. I'm more of a color guy. I don't know if I have the quick facial recognition plus the fact that I don't have TV cameras and all that when it comes to USAFL games. So I
Yep.
do more of the the special comments, as the Aussies say, not color commentary as we say over here in America. I don't know why there's such a difference, but favorite part about calling the footy.
I think it's just painting the picture. I started off in radio, and one thing that a famous broadcaster here in Adelaide told me when I asked for some advice when I bumped into him once is when you're commentating, and particularly from a radio perspective, you got to think about he said to me, think that there's a farmer on a tractor in the middle of a paddock, and he's listening to the game, and you're painting that picture. You need
Mhm.
to be able to let him see in his mind what's happening on the field. And that's always stuck really nicely with me. It's resonated that I've got to paint the picture. In recent times, things are a little bit different, calling not on radio anymore and predominantly for the streaming side of it. So a little bit different in that visually people can also see what's happening. But I like that base skill set that paint the picture. And that's what I love, being able to let people hear what's happening and see what's happening.
Yeah, it's absolutely great, and I know it's not it's such an interesting skill to be able to kind of weave the your words to be able to kind of make the tapestry that is the game. Such an incredible talent, and never easy. So I give you kudos on that. So we'll go from the greatest to the worst. What's the hardest part about calling the footy?
To be honest, that player identification can sometimes be a little bit tricky. Certainly, particularly at the start of a new season, if there's a lot of new faces. Hence the reason I come to trial games. I often say to young broadcasters, we're doing a little bit of mentoring in the last couple of seasons. The football players have a pre-season. The commentators need to have a pre-season as well. You can't expect to rock up round one, not seeing 5 or 6 new faces, and expect to be able to identify them over on the outer side of an oval with their half their shoulder turned, not being able to see their Guernsey number for identification. So
Mhm.
certainly the player identification can be a challenge. And also I think sometimes it depends on the style of the game. If the game's a little bit slow and a bit harder to call and not as lively with a lot of action, again, going back to that painting the picture, you have to be good at being able to fill the gaps as well. So I think that always comes down to the advantage of having a good co-commentator or someone, a color commentator that you can bounce off of as well. So sometimes you have some challenges with some that aren't as naturally talented as others, and that can be a challenge.
Yeah, definitely for sure. And the thing is, if you can find that one person that you really bounce off with, it makes it even better because it makes your job easier. I know
Yeah.
as we kind of discussed, we have a mutual friend who calls some of the USAFL games. He's just absolutely fantastic. And he really does good at leading me in when I do special comments. So it's absolutely uh it's so cool to kind of have that fun time to be able to chat like that. So and I
Sure.
know not all calling is just in the box. I love sometimes the boundary stuff. So I think you had told me pre-Mike that you have actually had the opportunity to cover on the boundary, and was it an easy transition to go from boundary kind of connection to up into the box?
No, mate, it wasn't. It really wasn't. And particularly because I'll never forget my first ever game of league footy commentating was out here at Elizabeth at Ex Convenience Oval. And I got a call up about an hour before the game. One of the main callers called in sick that morning. So that was the game I talked about, that familiarity with Centrals. Lucky that it was a Centrals game. But yeah, it was a challenge. It was definitely a challenge transitioning from the boundary to calling play by play. Donnie, I love boundary. I did it for 2 or 3 years, and I found it as a real niche of mine. I'm comfortable getting out onto the oval at the breaks or after the game and chatting to the players. And I feel like that really brought something to the coverage. It was some community radio stations, again, were involved in when I was doing it. And I thought it brought something extra to the listeners. I'd often get fans see me, at a game and go, "Oh, we loved your interview with, Brady Dorr out on the oval after the game." So that was a real thing that I loved. I miss it. I actually miss it. If there's ever been opportunities in recent seasons to do it again, I've jumped on it. We talked about Peter Holden. I went over to Melbourne and did some boundary riding for a state game over in Victoria. But yeah, I love that boundary interaction. I really do, and I really enjoy watching others do it as well. It's great to get that real ground level insight, and I love providing it.
Yeah, and if you can gain quick rapport with some of the players, it makes it much more comfortable for them too. Which I love when you can see that when you have the really good boundary rider that can get a player to kind of maybe say something that maybe they kind of hold back a little bit. So that's always fun. So I'm interested because again, you have a little bit more of a professional atmosphere than I do over here in the USAFL. So can you kind of just run me through a typical day of calling? How early do you get there? Do you know, are you already ahead of who you're going to have as a co-commentator? Do you have color? Kind of what is your typical day when it comes to calling?
So generally speaking, the SANFL employs someone that runs the roster and gives us notification at the start of the week, Tuesday, Wednesday at the latest. We're knowing who we're calling with and where. Obviously, you always have to be on standby for some late changes, which I talked about with my debut commentating. But yeah, the week will start there. You get your roster, you know where you're going to be calling. For mine, my preparation starts probably about a Thursday night. Once I know the teams I'm doing, the league teams get released, so you know what the ins and outs or the changes are. That's when I get stuck into my preparation, and I spend a fair few hours outside of work doing that. Get home from work on a Friday night, and I'll chuck the Friday night game on the telly, and I'll probably spend at least an hour on each side going through the players individually and just getting a little bit of a background check on them. And I also like to just find out little tidbits of information about them, what they do work-wise, if they've got any relatives that have played previously, and also a little bit of info about what their form is coming into the game.
Yeah, and those are good because those little tidbits sometimes are fascinating, and some of the things that they find out are absolutely insane. I know the AFL ones, they can get quite funny sometimes just to hear those. So I
Yeah.
could only imagine some of the ones that you might hear in the SANFL, even more different lives. So we go from that to I love this one because I think everybody sees the seriousness of the US callers. Like everything is very serious, everything is business-like. But the one thing I got to give the AFL and footy commentators I hear over there is you're very loose and it's a lot of fun. So can you give me a funny moment calling the footy that you can recall?
A funny moment. I remember doing a game. I mentioned a colleague, Phil Herden, who got me into the industry to start with. We were commentating a game at Norwood Oval, which is going to be hosting some AFL stuff with the gather round coming up. And it was a night game. We were ready to commentate. I was down on the boundary to begin with. And one of the light globes in the tower exploded and shards of glass fell out onto the oval. And I was boundary rider at the time. Phil Herden was keen. He's a great man. He's always very detailed, very thorough, provides a great statistical information to the SANFL. And he decided that he wanted to get out over to the light tower. It was the furthest light tower from our commentary position. And I just remember putting the binoculars up and seeing Phil Herden on hands and knees picking up shards of glass off the oval because the game had to stop. It was a
Mhm.
safety thing.
Yeah.
So there was a whole crew, including good friend Phil, down on hands and knees picking up shards of glass so that we could get the game back underway.
That's insane. That's crazy. And it just shows you how one thing can change the complete. But the best part is he's a team player to help get the game back on. That's
Absolutely. That's
absolutely
built to a T.
fantastic. And another thing, I remember talking with Sarah Ollie earlier and some of the fun stories that she had just behind the camera, like something most people are never going to see unless a story comes out. So can you tell me a story behind the mic that some people maybe don't know that it's one you're never going to forget?
Never going to forget the last game of football ever commentated at Footy Park. So South Australian fans, AFL fans will know the famous football park down at West Lakes. And another good friend of mine, Don Cooper, we did some commentary, and there was an under-18s final at Footy Park. It was North Adelaide and Norwood from memory. And young Will Hayward, if you're a Swans man, you'll remember Will. Oh,
Hmm.
you'll know Will. He kicked 9 goals in that preliminary final. We broadcast the game. We streamed it for the SANFL. But Footy Park was just at the beginnings of its demolition. So Don Cooper and I commentated that game basically from within a crushed demolition commentary box. There was not much there. All the walls were down around us, and it was an interesting spot to call footy from, but definitely a memorable one because particularly Will kicked 9 goals and dominated the game.
Yeah, so it's almost known for two things: the insane situation that you were in, but also the fantastic performance
Yeah,
of a young player that has, I think, has stepped up into the AFL and played great. I love Will Hayward. I think his game is fantastic. I'm so glad he's still with the Swans. I think I do worry every off season. Oh God, is he going to go back to South
going to
Australia?
come
We'll
home.
have to
Yeah.
see, but we'll go from there. So we'll go back to you, sir. And I know that for every SANFL player, there's always that dream. Can I make the AFL? So I asked this, sir. You've called SANFL, as you said, for so many years. Is there any interest in going to the big time and calling AFL? Or are you happy calling SANFL games?
Absolutely love SANFL. It's my passion. I love commentating it. I have been lucky enough to call one pre-season AFL game in country South Australia. My friend Phil Hurd, and I talk a lot about him. He and I drove up to Renmark, the country town in the Riverland, a good 10 years ago, and called Port Adelaide and the Melbourne Demons in a pre-season game. So that was a great opportunity. I wouldn't knock it back, Donnie. If someone asked me, can I do it? But I will be honest, if I had the chance to call an AFL game and it meant giving up a SANFL game, I'm calling the SANFL every day of the week.
I love the passion and I love the loyalty. That's absolutely fantastic. I don't begrudge you on that because, hey, it's something that you know, it's something that you're passionate about. I absolutely support that. So we'll go to it again. You've called many SANFL game, and I know you said you're a central supporter, but I think everybody secretly, though you have a state side, do you have an AFL side? And if so, who is it?
I grew up being a Crows supporter, not too passionate, just because they were at the time the only South Australian side in the
Mhm.
competition. And I was lucky enough to go to school and grow up a little bit with Stuart Dew. So when he started playing for Port Adelaide, I became a Port Adelaide supporter. When he was at Hawthorn, I was a Hawthorn supporter. When he was at Sydney, I was a Sydney supporter. I follow Stewie. So I'm a Gold Coast supporter at the moment. But to be honest, I'm passionate for the South Australian teams. If the Crows and Port are playing an interstate team, I'll be cheering them on. When it's a showdown, it's a flip of the coin. I'm not too fussed who wins as long as it's a good game.
Yeah, you're the neutral. You're like one team scores, yay, another team scores, yay. There's
Yeah,
nothing wrong with that. I absolutely love it. So, and the fact that you sound a lot like a lot of American fans, because a lot of American fans like the Tom Brady situation. He leaves New England, and all of a sudden,
yeah.
all these New England fans are now in Tampa Bay. I was like, really? Seriously? So, for me, I guess I've fallen in love with almost the how we say the tribal nature of the AFL. Like you support your team and that's it. I've always wanted to ask this question, but I'm worried for the responses going, is it okay as an AFL supporter if I wear another team's shirt because I want to support AFL and footy over here in the States? But I'm terrified of the responses because I know one thing I tell a lot of Americans over here is never tweet who should I support in the AFL? Because that is a way for not only your timeline to blow up, but for you to see damn near fights on the Twitter responses because somebody will go, "Hey, I want you to cheer Essendon," and then three people that totally dislike Essendon to bash them, and then for them to get into an argument on your timeline. So
Yeah, so I can only
it,
imagine that the
it,
passion would be tenfold compared to Aussie rules here.
exactly, absolutely. So it's always a fun one there. So I completely understand and respect that. That's absolutely fantastic. So as I kind of related to it, we connected because I put out a tweet because I was watching the Central's Norwood game this last weekend because as I said, I had the absolute honor of chatting with Ali Farrell and I wanted to watch the game. It was on a decent time, so I sat down, put it on my iPad and enjoyed Phil calling the game. And I just happened to, I was like, you know what? I'm going to tweet about it because I'm crazy. I'm a footy head. I wanted to put it on. So you've been calling some of the, we're 3 rounds into the women's game, as we kind of discussed off mic that we have the South Australian holiday. So there's no footy this weekend. So I'm sitting up here twiddling my thumbs this weekend with no AFL, no SANFL, and no other footy right now. So I think a few old games might actually hit on my
Rewatch.
iPad this weekend. Exactly.
Yeah.
So I ask you this: your thoughts so far? I know we're only 3 rounds in so far. The sample W because right now, as soon as I think I know who's the dominant team, something throws me off. Whether it's West Adelaide starting the season strong and then dropping a game that I was not expecting them to drop. So this has been kind of a helter skelter start of the year. So your thoughts on the sample W so far?
Yeah, look, no surprise to see South Adelaide and North Adelaide at top of the table. The Roosters have been a dominant force in the SANFL. It's in its seventh season now, and I think they've been a wonderful team. Ali's Norwood girls have had a slow start to the year. I called her first game back from injury last week, and by chatting to her on Twitter as well, she suggested that the girls have just lost those close games. I think that's been a bit of a bummer for them. The improvement of West Adelaide, Donnie, you touched on it, and one player doesn't make a difference. You can't, base it around one player. But Lauren
Mm-hmm.
Young, she's only a superstar in the making, 17 years of age. She missed all of last year. West Adelaide won the wooden spoon. She's
Mm-hmm.
back this year, and all of a sudden they won their first 2 games, and Westies are up and firing. They've got a new coach. They've got some good recruits as well. So, but for mine, I think South Adelaide and North Adelaide, the trendsetters in the competition at the moment, they'll be around the mark come finals time. Some improvement showing from Centrals and Eagles. You spoke about Narelle Smith, the Woodville West Torrens coach. Her girls have been much more competitive, and the doggies, for the first time in their history in the SANFL competition, started the year 2-1. So they'll be keen to continue that momentum and try and break through for that first finals appearance. But for mine, I think it's going to be between North Adelaide and South Adelaide for the premiership this year.
Yeah, I was gonna. That was my next question. Is who right now? I know again we're only 3 rounds in. Injury, everything can happen right now. Just a real quick guess off what you've kind of saw. Who's your tip between between South and North right now to win the flag?
Well, I think it's probably South Adelaide for mine. They've got Rick Watts, who's a great coach of women. He's back at the helm, and of course Chrissy Steen. For those that know the women's coach in South Australia, she's a person you should reach out to and have a chat to. She is one of the most passionate women in footy in South Australia. She's got the Roosters purring nicely. Had a bit of a poor second game the other week, but I think if it was a grand final tomorrow between South and North, I'm just tipping the Panthers.
Yeah, I would agree with you. I think South has been a lot stronger. I'm interested to see how Glenelg and Sturt go because they've been kind of on and off a little bit. So I'm fascinated in because one thing I communicate with Rookie Me Central, who does a lot of
Yep.
recruiting for all that. And one player that stuck out to me in 3 games, and for me to see a guy I know really well who runs that site throw her name out there after I had kind of put it in the back of my head is Piper Window from Glenelg. She has impressed me so much with her play. I joked with him online. I said, I'm a huge Sydney supporter. I said, I know she probably won't leave SA, but I'd love to have her in the Swans next year, potentially in this next draft. I don't think she's eligible because I think she's underage, but
Yeah.
it's fascinating that to see some of these young girls, some 16, 17, 18 year olds that, oh my gosh, I am so impressed. And the scary part is just to think Port and Adelaide are going to get the first cracks to get these girls on their list very, very soon.
Yeah, Piper Window, one that you mentioned, her granddad rather, Gary's a legend out here at Central Districts, our first McGarry medalist. So a little bit sad to not see her playing for the Bulldogs in the red, white, and blue, but she's a star in the making. She and the likes of Shanae Goody, some other
Mhm.
girls that are really talented. I think the thing that I've seen in the progression over the last 7 or 8 years, Donnie, that I've seen with the standard of girls and women's footy is the pathways are there from an earlier age. The girls we're coming through now, they've had a footy in their hands since
Mhm.
they were 5 and 6 years old. So they've now got 10 years of honing their skills, learning the nuances of the game, as opposed to getting a basketball or a netballer to try and
Mhm.
convert over. So I know a gentleman here in South Australia, Robbie Neal, he's involved with the SANFL women's program. I've done some commentary with Robbie. He's a great man, and his work can't be underestimated. There's some wonderful people that have really worked hard behind the scenes to get that real pathway there. And we're reaping the benefits of it with the standard of women's footy.
Yeah, I agree. And it's hard to argue that if you ask any recruiter and you ask anybody that's out there, South Australia, it's really hard to deny that they do not have the strongest, not only state league, but just the factory of youth. And then I know I'd love to ask you, I'm not sure 100%. I know there's an Ebert playing for North Adelaide. Is she part of kind of the Ebert dynasty or is it a distant and not a relation?
No, they're related. It's I think a third or fourth cousin, but her dad Daniel played some league footy for North Adelaide, just over 100 games. And yeah, I saw her play last week for North Adelaide against the Eagles, and just I think 16 years old. So again, you
Mhm.
touched on the young nature of the girls coming through, but she's definitely a talent in the making and has those Ebert DNA genes running through her veins.
Definitely. So I love talking when I love talking women's, but I think you also cover the men's too, and we are getting closer and closer to the start of their season going. So just a real quick preview. What are your thoughts on the men's comp this year? And is there a team sticking out to you that you think could potentially be your flag favorite?
A little bit like the women's, it's hard not to go past the sides that were strong last year. Norwood, the premiership team over North Adelaide. I was lucky enough to call that grand final with a very good friend, John Nankiville, a passionate Norwood man, and I think his Redlegs are going to be around the mark again. They've only lost a couple through recruiting, but Jade Rawlings, their coach, he's a wonderful coach, and I think he's got some good some players coming in. Jacob Surgeon coaches North Adelaide, and I think the Roosters will be up there again. I wouldn't be surprised, Donny. Very hard to say this early in the piece, but I wouldn't be surprised if we see a repeat of last year's grand finalists kicking off again in the Premiership decider. I think we'll see the Panthers, South Adelaide, improve. They've done some very nice recruiting. They've had a bit of a turnover of players that weren't able to really get the job done in seasons gone by. So they've brought in some AFL talent, and I think we'll see them improve. And the Eagles, after maybe a couple of seasons not dominating as they had done previously, some turnover there as well. James Rowe, an AFL listed boy, comes back in previously with the
Mhm.
Crows, and I think he'll be good for them. I think West Adelaide will still struggle. We'll see Centrals improve a little bit. Good friend of mine, Paul Thomas, coaching them. I grew up with Paul, went to school together, and I think in Tomo's third year, we should see the Doggies maybe win a few more games than last year. And a few other unknowns. The Double Blues, not really sure about. They've got a lot of turnover of players as well. But yeah, right here, right now, I think it'll be probably between Norwood and North Adelaide again for the flag.
Yeah, I mean, again, it's real early. It's paper things you're all going off of, and again, footy can
Yeah.
have this weird thing of one knee injury could change a team's thing. I mean, we look at West Coast and Port Adelaide last year, absolutely horrible starts, and they never could recover from that.
Stuff
And
like that.
West Coast, I mean, their season just, I mean, it hit the basement and it seemed to go subterranean at times. So
Yeah.
it just shows you that anything can happen. So it's always fascinating, and I'm going to try to keep as much of an eye on the SA men's as I can. I cover the AFL, so but I'm super excited because I can't wait to see, because I know the SA, the Waffle and the VFL, they have those underagers that could potentially pop up into your draft, and especially with the men's being a national draft, I think it'll be fun to be able to kind of see players a little bit before they make their AFL debuts. So I'm gonna go into your head a little bit. Is there an underager that's going to be playing SANFL this year that we should be looking out for to potentially be drafted in this next draft?
The first one that comes to mind, there's a boy out here at Central's named Brody Tuck. He's playing in a reserves trial right now, and he's got an untapped talent. There's a little bit of X factor about him, and I think sometimes some of these players themselves don't realise what they've got. And I think Brody maybe just needs to work on his concentration throughout the game. But putting me on the spot, Don, there's a couple of others I can think of at Noah. There's a guy from the Redlegs. His name just escapes me at the moment, but look, there's plenty of talent coming through the SANFL juniors. I want to speak of a player called Rhett Montgomery. He's a Central's boy and a bit of a mature ager. He had a great year at SANFL level, overlooked in all the drafts in previous years, and found himself getting an opportunity at Essendon. He's on Essendon's list this year. So there's a great example of where the SANFL, despite you being a little bit older, 22, 23, considered a little bit past drafting age, still plenty of opportunities for mature ages to get picked up.
Yeah, and if you find the right spot in the right niche area, sometimes those overagers can be absolutely fantastic for your list. I know Sydney has found a way to do that several times. I mean, there's some overagers that they've gotten rookie drafts and stuff like that, like Dean Rampy, Jake Lloyd. So if you can find if you have a good enough list manager that can find those hidden gems, they could be absolutely fantastic. So can't
Yeah.
wait for it. So we've been talking a lot of SA, but I want to go to the AFL with SA because I'm fascinated about this, the gather round that the NRL rip off, that I, whether the name should be what it is, we'll keep that to another discussion. I'm fascinated by this because unfortunately the SANFL will take the bye week that week because all 9 AFL games will find themselves in South Australia, a majority of them in Adelaide, a couple will find themselves outside. So as an SA guy, I know you're a SANFL guy, huge. How excited is South Australia for gather round? And do you think you're going to attend any games during gather round?
Yeah, I think it's really buzzing. You know, I heard the Premier of South Australia, Peter Malinauskas, on radio during the week, and he was saying something like 85% of occupancy for all hotels is already filled up, and
Mhm.
it's going to be a great tourism buffer for the state. I think they're very lucky that they've been able to secure gather round here. And yeah, look, I'll try and head along. I might get to Norwood Oval to watch. I think there's a Fremantle Gold Coast game,
Mhm.
so I'll be keen to maybe see Stewie Jew and see how he goes with the Gold Coast Suns. And Norwood Oval, obviously being a doggies man, always fan of Elizabeth, but I lived on the parade at Norwood for 10 years. It became my second home and one of the best grounds to watch footy at. It feels like a real kind of nice little community atmosphere. So I reckon I'll head to the parade and maybe watch that Freo Gold Coast game.
Yeah, and get to see your old buddy. That's fantastic. Love hearing it. So, all right. So I need you to do me a favor. Take off your commentary hat for a little bit. Put on your fan hat because I've told a lot of people through many of my podcasts, I have not been to Australia. It is on my bucket list. I want to get
Please.
there. In fact, I had a very passionate Norwood person reach out to me and go, Donnie, when you said your bucket list, you didn't say South Australia and to come to the Adelaide Oval. So I have amended that and said I want to come to the SCG, the MCG. I'd love to get the Adelaide Oval, and I'd even love to get to the Gabba and even Optus Stadium. I know it's difficult. It won't be easy, but I want
Yeah.
to do it one time. So I asked you this. I'm doing some research, so when I come over, I'm ready. So as an American, we love our food at the footy. So I asked this: what is your go-to food when you go to the footy games?
It has to be the old sausage and bread, the snag, as we call it down here in
Mm-hmm.
Australia. And yeah, that's most grounds have a wonderful barbecue offering. And I think followed closely by the great hot dog. Nothing like a good hot dog at the footy. I used to be a bit of a traditional meat pie type of guy, but yeah, I think the sausage and bread is always the go-to and one of the first things you get to when you get to the Oval.
Yeah, fantastic. And then the ultimate one, whenever you come to the game, where you got to find the best seat. You got to find the best seat in the house to watch the footy. So when you go to a game, not calling, when you go to the game, where's your ideal place to sit when you go to the footy?
I always enjoy that elevated view up in the grandstand, so I'll try and head back up towards the broadcast position and normally sit there. But I think looking back over my I suppose journey following SANFL footy, there's something pretty passionate and exciting about going down behind the goals as well and watching your team and then following them to the other end when the quarter changes over. So that's a great viewpoint as well. But yeah, I would think that elevated platform view from the top of the grandstand.
Fantastic, fantastic. And the question that I always end all of my episodes in, and this is fascinating because you watch a ton of SANFL, you watch a ton of AFL. So I ask this: favorite game of footy you have ever seen live on the telly, doesn't matter. Favorite game of footy you have ever seen.
Yeah, absolutely no brainer here, Donnie. My answer is the Central District's 2000 Premiership, the grand final. 64 years in the competition without a premiership. We'd only made two grand finals previously. I remember 95 and 96, we lost to the famous Port Adelaide Magpies. I'll never forget crying my eyes out on the bus on the way home after the 96 grand final. We were the best team all year and Port just too good on the day. But I remember crying my eyes out when Central's won that inaugural flag in the year 2000 against Woodville West Torrens. So was just a fan, but I got to the ground, 9 o'clock in the morning, watched the junior finals, got that front row seat on the outer side. And I talk of Stewie Dew. I've got a photo at home. I'll never forget it. Stewie doing that premiership victory lap with the team and reached out and gave me a high five. And a cherished memory I'll never forget. And certainly that first premiership is always something very special at any sporting level.
Yeah, I love seeing the smile when they talk about their favorite game too. It's like when I did my off-season supporter series, I asked their favorite moment and just the twinkle in their eyes as they said that. It's always
Yeah.
so cool to see. Well, Phil, that is going to do it for my questions. This has been so fantastic. Again, I can't believe a little tweet thrown out gave me this absolutely fantastic opportunity. And as I said, I who would have known the SANFL now would have been such a great investment for me just because I'm getting to see footy that right now there's that little bit of vacuum. There's no footy there. So having the SANFL to kind of be that nice little treat to get me into the AFLW and the AFL, I cannot wait for this because it's been so fantastic. So I want to thank you so much for hopping on and having a chat with a lonely American who just loves his footy.
Don, my pleasure, mate. Great to have a chat with you and just a perfect advertisement for why the SANFL now is such a great thing. Interstate, overseas, we get a lot of family members that don't live here in South Australia that can subscribe and watch their family. And I can remember just quickly a couple of years ago calling an underage grand final. And at quarter time of the game, we had a girl come up to the commentary position and said, where's this platform? How do I get this game? Because my brother in Switzerland is watching the game out and he wants to be able to watch his brother play out on the oval. So I love that far-reaching element of streaming, and that's what I love about the SANFL now. Great value for money, but great to interact with people all around the world.
Well, I'll say this. I know the SANFL now has jumped ahead on it's absolutely fantastic, but I would love to see the Waffle and the VFL potentially trying to find a way to do that because honestly, if they did, I would invest because I think it'd be absolutely worth it. I have the Watch AFL over here, which gives me the opportunity to watch all of the AFL and AFLW games live. And it is a lifesaver because I can't tell you how many times I have tweeted about being awake at 4:25 in the morning for a 7:25 first bounce Swans v Essendon, Swans v the Richmond Tigers, and getting the Swans tweeting my a response saying dedicated to the fact that I'm up at 4:25 in the morning to watch the footy. So I think it's an absolutely fantastic thing. So do me a favor if there's somebody that you know at SANFL now, please thank them because I genuinely have loved this investment. I think it's going to be great for me to be able to see more and more footy and to be able to invest in state league because I think the AFL it's so monopoly well, not monopoly but it's so big that it kind of takes away a little bit of the feel of footy when I talk to people that it's such a town, it's such a community type of thing. So to be able to connect with a state league and the intimate connections that they have with some of their fans, I think is absolutely fantastic.
Yeah, that's why I love it, mate. Value for money. So SANFL now, it's one of the best things that the local competition has invested in.
Absolutely. And I will keep it for sure. Ladies and gentlemen, that is going to do it for our episode. Again, we are closer and closer to the AFL season. And again, keep an eye out. We'll have SANFL reviews, Waffle reviews, VFL reviews, and we're going to have a SANFL W review here very, very soon after round 4 to review how the first 4 games are going. Yes, we just talked about it a little bit, but I want to go a little bit more into detail very soon. So keep an eye out on that. And we will be back again very, very soon with more coverage here on Donnie's Disposal.